Welcome to the show, Chris Graham with Jerry Ratcliffe on the Jerry Ratcliffe Show, and it's we're in that time of year. It's early July. We're waiting for football to start, and we'll talk some football as this show goes on. But we'll start where it seems like basketball season never ended, Jerry. We say that a lot, but we got some more basketball news to get into. Last week when we were talking, it was about some potential recruits getting ready to commit, and one of those young men did. Christian Bliss on Friday last week announcing that he is committing to the University of Virginia. That's a big get for Tony Bennett and his staff.
Yeah, huge get. And I really thought he was going to come here after he visited. He went to Xavier for a short visit right after he left Charlottesville. He didn't comment much on Xavier, so he did like his visit to Virginia. And one of the reason I thought he would commit here, Chris, more than anything, was that he pointed out that one of the major factors he was looking for is not only player development, but personal development, not only in the classroom, but also just as a human being. And so he was very impressed with Mike Curtis in terms of strength and conditioning, which was something very important to him. And the fact that Tony Bennett and his staff have developed so many players that have gone on to the next level and continue to do so, that Tony had played point guard in the NBA himself. So Bliss thought he could learn some things from him. And he liked just the way that Tony runs his life and the 5 pillars and all that stuff. And obviously the academics are nothing that you can even question, but I think that was the total package he was looking for, particularly the developmental part. And I think that really sold him on becoming a Wahoo.
So when you look at it with him in the class of 2024, suddenly point guard is a position of a lot of strength for Virginia. When you go into this year, Reese Beekman returning, Dante Harris off the transfer portal. He was already in the program as a redshirt after coming in from Georgetown mid season, second semester. Then Andrew Rohde coming in. He's a sort of a combo guard, but he played point guard and was a really good point guard at St. Mary's as a freshman last year, in addition to scoring 17 points a game. So that'll be the 3-point guards for the 2023-2024 season. Then Beekman cycles out, but he'll be replaced in the roster in a sense by Bliss. So 3-point guards, because both Harris and Rohde have 3 years of eligibility each left when I start this fall. So that's the last couple of years Virginia had 2 really good point guards in Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman, but that's pretty much all Tony Bennett had. And he'll have it'll be good because he'll have a backup plan in place. There was a game this past year, I remember the Wake Forest game down in Winston-Salem, where both Beekman and Clark got 4 fouls around the 10-minute mark of the second half, and Tony had to go 3 or 4 very uncomfortable minutes with nobody on the floor playing point guard. That at least that won't be a problem going forward.
Yeah, and for those people that were against Kihei coming back for an extra year, can you imagine what might have happened had he not? I mean, who else do you go to?
Yeah, especially when Beekman got hurt there for a while, and he played a few games hurt, and he was out for at least one whole game and maybe a couple games in part. So Kihei doesn't come back. A lot of things don't happen. I don't think an ACC regular season championship happens, but there's certainly a weakness there, and again, a strength in the future. And then that's not even including the ongoing recruitment of Chance Mallory, a class of 2025 point guard from St. Anne's Belfield. Tony putting a lot of emphasis on getting those point guards into the program.
Yeah, I think his offense is predicated on having a good point man, and at least one good point man, because we know he likes to sometimes play 2 at the same time. But was talking to Kihei and Ty Jerome and those guys. They set up the offense. They make things go. They find the open man and make things happen. And the better point guard you have who can, especially if he can create his own shot, and if they can hit the outside shot, that means a lot to any offense, particularly Virginia's, which is predicated somewhat on passing the ball around, wearing the defense down, and finding the open man. And if you don't have somebody excellent at that position, the whole thing kind of backfires on you.
One other bit of recruiting news, Virginia reaching out to a forward from New Jersey who has Virginia ties in a sense, of the former CAA Player of the Year, Odell Hodge from ODU back in the early to mid 90s. His son, Matthew Hodge, has received an offer from UVA basketball.
Yeah, he seems like chip off the old block for sure. Odell Hodge played from 92 to 97 at ODU. He's 6'9". Matthew is 6'8", still in high school. Odell was the two-time CAA Player of the Year, and he's still their third all-time leading scorer with over 2,000 points, over 1,000 rebounds, and nearly 300 block shots. So you can see why he was so highly regarded at ODU. And certainly ODU has come after Matthew. Jeff Jones would love to have him as part of the Monarchs program. And they have offered him, along with Maryland, Alabama, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Seton Hall, Rutgers, and I assume maybe some more by now, along with Virginia. But Matthew was offered the day after our last podcast, Chris. So this is the first we're talking about him on here. He's a 6'8" power forward, 200 pounds. He averaged nearly 15 points and 9 rebounds, 3.4 block shots at St. Rose, which is up in, I think, Belmar, New Jersey. And he's considered a 3-star right now, but I imagine that will probably rise as he progresses. Number 88 overall recruit by 247. The number 40 power forward, although their national consensus of all the recruiting services has him as the number 27 power forward in his class, and in the top 7 in New Jersey by both of those recruiting services. He already has an official visit scheduled to Penn State, and said that he was setting up visits to Virginia Tech and Old Dominion. And he's a teammate of Bliss, I believe, with the PSA Cardinals, and they're down in North Augusta as we speak, and at Peach Jam, right across the river from Augusta, Georgia, home of the Masters. And so they'll be there for the rest of this week. I think that's over on Sunday or Monday. And so he thinks that when he gets back from Peach Jam, he's going to evaluate all the interest in him and narrow his list of schools. With the PSA Cardinals, which is sort of the Nike EYBL circuit, used to be, I guess, it's another form of AAU. There's so many things out there now, it confuses me, but he's averaging a little over 8 points a game, and is shooting 38% from the 3-point line. So he's not just a power forward strength guy. He can also take it out to the perimeter if he needs to. We all know that Tony likes guys who can do that. So another recruit that Virginia's got their eye on. I know that Virginia's got their coaches all over the place now that the recruitment period is open again. I think they've reached out to 20 to 25 people already and they're all over the country watching them as we speak. I think Tony is up north somewhere watching maybe, and I'm not sure who's down at Pete's Jam, probably Woolfolk or possibly Ron Sanchez. I'm not sure who's down there, but they're scattered all over the place, getting a good evaluation of all these players.
I think I'd rather be up north. The further north, the better the chance is it might be 5 degrees cooler. I don't know if it's getting much cooler anywhere right now, but north may give you a better shot. That's probably why Tony's he went in that direction.
It could be. He's a northern guy, right?
He's a northern guy, plus he's the boss. He can choose where he wants to go. So a lot of basketball recruiting news there. Jerry, you mentioned before we started the podcast that you've been on a couple radio shows this week talking UVA football, just kind of general look at the 2023 season. Also, I mentioned when you said that I've done a couple columns this week kind of doing similar things. So, but, we're still 3 weeks away. I just looked at the schedule. We're still 3 weeks away from the ACC kickoff, which will kind of get us going for our coverage of the preseason in earnest as far as that goes. But what are your thoughts, and what have you been talking about with the radio folks about this upcoming UVA football season?
Well, both of the radio hosts, Bob Black at ESPN Richmond and Luke Neer at Best Seat in the House, we're just kind of wondering. I guess they're in sort of the same shape we're in. There's not a lot going on in July, but until kickoff pops up in Charlotte in a few weeks. But they were both just kind of inquisitive about what the UVA football fans have to get excited about come August training camp and when the season begins. And, candidly, you try to be optimistic and I wish Tony Elliott and his staff the best, but it's hard to find a lot of things to get excited about. I said, perhaps they're going to have to depend heavily on John Rudzinski's defense. He did a marvelous job last year in his first year as Virginia's defensive coordinator. There were some pretty stingy performances by that defense throughout the course of the season, even though they were behind the 8 ball and put in some bad predicaments time and time again. So I think, they're going to have to rely heavily on a defense that lost its 2 best players through the transfer portal. And which was a shame, because if they had those 2 guys coming back, wow, I wouldn't want to play against that defense, I don't think, no matter how good my offense is. But so they're going to have to find some other people and try to hold opponents down to as low as they can. And there were several games last year where the defensive side of the ball did their job, and they kept opponents' scoring totals down to where it should have been at least a winnable game or a competitive game, but the offense just couldn't come through. They averaged 17 points a game. We've talked about that here before. And the best part of that offense from my perch is gone. Those receivers are gone, and some of the linemen are gone, and quarterback is gone. I don't know if that's a bad thing, because he had a miserable year last year and couldn't even hit wide open wide receivers. It was some of the worst quarterbacking I've seen in a long time. And so, I had to be honest on those shows, and there's not a lot I don't think to be excited about, because if you can't score, you can't win. And I don't care how good your defense is, you've got to find ways to score. And I know they scored a bunch of points in the spring game, but that was the spring game against each other. And, you can't judge really anything by a spring game. I don't think. Maybe you could back 20, 25 years ago, not these days. And, when training camp opens, I'm sure you and I and all the rest of us out there listening or watching on YouTube are going to be extremely focused on the quarterback job. And can Tony Muskett run this offense? Can he put points on the board? If he can't, is Jay Woolfolk capable of doing it? And we all know that he's playing baseball right now for USA Baseball and not really here working, doing 7-on-7 skeleton drills, all that stuff, and working out a chemistry with the receivers that he has. Some of them new or people playing more prominent roles this year than they did a year ago. And, can he magically make that up in August training camp after playing baseball all spring and part of the summer? It's a real challenge. And certainly he's a great athlete and maybe he can do it. We've heard Tony Elliott say, not this past spring, but the previous spring when Woolfolk lit things up in a scrimmage, not with his arm, but with his legs. And Tony Elliott described him as electric in that scrimmage with his ability to make things happen when pass protection breaks down or if he just had a called running play. And, I think that's something that could be in Virginia's benefit, is having a running quarterback who can create and make things happen. And that might be the best way to open up an offense that was pretty stagnant last year.
I did a review, Jerry, of what some of the preseason guides have to say. They still publish these things, and Athlon and
Right for one of them.
yeah, Athlon and On Three put Virginia 14th in the ACC. That's dead last. Phil Steele was a little nicer, 13th. ESPN's Football Power Index also 13th. 24/7 Sports, I think somebody there might be smoking some of the hokum. They put Virginia's worst case scenario at 4-8 overall and 2-6 in the ACC. That's not going to be 13th or 14th. That's closer to 10th or 11th, I'd say. And 24/7 Sports also said best case scenario 6-6 and 4-4. And I tell you what, I wonder who wrote that article. As far as that goes, I think 3-9 is probably the over under. I know that you wouldn't put a betting over under at 3-9 because you'd want 2.5 or 3.5, but I think 3-9 is sort of the line for Virginia this year as far as things go. And you look at the schedule; it's not a easy schedule. You start with Tennessee. You got JMU at home. JMU won 8 games last year in its first year, and FBS, and they've got that game you circle on their calendar and have had for months. Then you play Maryland, which Maryland is, they're not the Maryland of the 1980s.
On the road
on a Friday night, and Maryland is, they were middle of the pack in the Big Ten last year. And when I looked at what their writers are saying about that game, they're penciling that one in, almost writing it in pen as a win for Maryland. So that's kind of what their expectations are. You got NC State in September coming to Charlottesville with Brennan Armstrong, with Robert and I don't know. That's going to be very pretty. I think at best out of those first 4 games, you're probably off to a 1-3 start. That's assuming that you maybe, eke out a win over a JMU team that, again, is at least on paper going to be as talented as this Virginia team. Then you got a game at Boston College that's very much a must win as far as this team's outlook goes. Boston College is another team that's picked towards the bottom of the conference. It's a game on the road, so that makes it a little tougher. But, that's the 5th game. Virginia plays 5 games in the month of September this year. And, if they can win that game and be 2-3, there's a chance, if they were to win one of those first 4 and then beat Boston College 2-3, I mean, they can play towards respectability at that stage. But, I can also see 0-5 out of that. And, when you go after that, William & Mary at home is not necessarily going to be easy. William & Mary was in the FCS playoffs last year.
I think they're picked pretty high in the FCS national poll too.
Yeah, they are. They won, I think, 11 games last year. And, when I looked at the ESPN Football Power Index, you can actually go game by game with that. And of course, it's early, one's hurt and that kind of thing. But The Football Power Index only has Virginia as a favorite in 3 of the 12 games this year. The home games with JMU, William and Mary, and Georgia Tech, another team picked towards the bottom of the ACC. So, there's a couple other games that, the Boston College game on the road, the Virginia Tech game at home that are close to 50-50s. But, a lot of things going to have to go right for this Virginia team to win 4 or 5 games. And, we'll see. I mean, the defense you mentioned, if the defense was solid last year, it loses Fintrell Cypress and Nick Jackson. If you had those guys back, you'd feel a lot better about the defense. I still feel pretty good about the defense, but the offense concerns the heck out of me. So many guys lost again, second straight year on the offensive line, another makeshift offensive line. I think that Tony Muskett's going to end up being the starting quarterback. I'm not sure if he's a better quarterback than Jay Woolfolk, but I think the fact that Jay, had to, for obvious reasons, Jay's going to be a draft pick in the MLB draft next year. He's got to think about his baseball career. That's why he's playing for Team USA now after a long spring with the UVA baseball team. But as a result of that, he got limited time in the spring practice with UVA football. He won't get any of that 7-on-7 skeleton time, just the time getting the timing down to his receivers in the summertime. I think that you're going to see Tony Muskett, a guy that's going to be challenged to even in a perfect scenario. If he had a veteran offensive line coming back, he'd be challenged making the jump from Monmouth to UVA playing in the ACC. I think playing behind that offensive line is going to be even more of a challenge for him. And the offense is going to really struggle. It's going to make the defense's job even harder. Last year, UVA was 117th in the country in third down conversions, 32.1%. That was with a veteran quarterback and veteran guys at wide receiver. If the offense is getting off the field as quick as they did last year, or even more so than last year, that defense is going to be out there playing a lot more with a lot less rest. And, I think we saw that in the second half of some games last year where as good as the defense was, it just wore down because of the sheer amount of challenge they got because the offense wasn't moving the ball enough. So I don't know, Jerry. I'm trying to be positive. There's a lot that we can hope for with this team in year 2 of Tony Elliott, but I don't know that we're going to see the results on the field.
Yeah, no, I agree. You try to be positive. Tony Elliott is a really nice guy, and all of these coaches that I've met are really good guys. You would wish them the best and hope that they could turn this thing around. It's just really hard when you get down in Division I Power 5 football. It's hard to reverse field, so to speak. And I'll tell you what, Chris, I would love, and I know this would never happen, but I would love to be able to go over and sit down in that offensive room and just listen to what the coaches are talking about, what they're saying, what they're planning, what they're trying to come up with to solve these issues. I think it would be fascinating to see what's on their minds and how they're addressing all the obstacles or whatever. And, these guys have been around some good football coaches. They've been around some good football programs. I'm sure they've seen a lot of stuff and have a lot of knowledge. And it would be nice just to listen to see what they're talking about. And they may have some ideas on how to open up the offense and execute that we're not privy to. And that would be just fascinating to listen to. But it's a major concern. And gosh, you look around college football now, and even if you're averaging 30 points a game, you're not even anywhere near the top 20, 25, 30 schools, maybe less than that. Because offenses are so wide open now. And if you don't have a dynamic quarterback, that really puts you behind the 8 ball. How do you generate points if the offensive line, as we know, has struggled here for years as coach after coach has tried to build a running game and just hasn't been very successful at it. There are times when they've been able to do it, but not on a consistent basis. And there's a lot of talented running backs in that running backs room. Maybe the biggest stable of running backs Virginia's had in years, maybe more than a decade, probably more than a decade. Maybe going back to some of those Al Groh teams when they had some pretty darn good running backs.
Yeah, the Wally Lundy, Alvin Pearman group.
Yeah.
This group could be as good as that, but we might not know it
We
because
might
of the
not
lack
know
of
it.
offensive line play.
Yeah, because Groh always had good offensive
Yeah.
linemen. It turned out some NFL guys, but
Yeah.
this offensive line is somewhat unproven, and you would like to think, if there's a way to generate points and yardage, it would be through all those really good running backs. But if they, I hate to keep going back to this quote by Al Groh, but I've never heard anything any more true about running games than what he told me once. He said, Jerry, all running backs run the same if there's no hole. There might have been a few exceptions to that, like Jim Brown and Earl Campbell. And so
Barry Sanders, maybe.
they might have made their own hole or found another one, but basically that's pretty true, and we've seen that more than we'd like. But as Tony Muskett, I don't know, you couldn't tell that much in the spring game. Is he a great passer, or didn't see him throw down the field that much successfully? They were mostly mid-range, short passes. That can work if you're hitting your running backs on some screen passes and some things, but eventually the defense catches on to that too. But I don't know, there might be some ways they can open up this offense that they're scheming as we speak. And there better be, because I mean, if they're averaging 17 points again this year, those predictions of 3-9 are in that neighborhood are almost destined to become true.
Jerry, to your point, I looked at last year's schedule and results, and if Virginia, there were 3 games that Virginia lost in that 3-7 finish, in which the defense gave up 24 points or less. I bring up that number 24 because Bronco Mendenhall famously, among the many things, he was a numbers guy, and he always said 24 was the number. Score more than 24, give up less than 24. That was the goal for each of those 2 units, and so 24 played a role last year. If the offense could have scored 24 points in 3 of those losses, a 3-7 season becomes a 6-4 season. If they finished last year 6-4, everything about Virginia football feels different right now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think Virginia fans would have been okay with that, particularly in a coaching change.
Yeah.
Like that in the first year of a coaching change. Because a lot of people don't expect a lot of success that first year, although I think most Virginia fans were really disappointed in last year because the offense failed so miserably with so many experienced guys returning who, I mean, I write for Lindy's preseason magazine. I was looking for it a minute ago when you were giving out those numbers. I don't know what they picked them. I forgot to look, but anyway, Lindy's had Virginia's receiving corps last year as the 4th best in the entire nation, and that might have been underrated, I thought, heading in, although they turned out to be a bust. And I still am trying to figure out why. I've heard a lot of theories. And with those guys returning and Armstrong, who was coming off an incredible year, and I've heard some theories on why he went bust as well. I guess we'll find out more about that this year when he's back in that same nice system that some people claim he couldn't play outside that system. And that's why the NFL wasn't interested. That's why some of the schools he visited in the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the SEC weren't interested. And that's why he ended up back with an eye again for another year, because he can operate in that system. Forgot what my point was, but about the 6-4 season. But yeah, I think that would have been beyond most people's expectations, really. And expectations this year are pretty low. I think last year created a sense, just talking to people and people reading the site, people sending me emails, running into people in the street. I sense a lot of apathy about it. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure you do. Well, I know you do. You monitor your stories and what people are reading. And there seems to be less interest in football right now than in the past. And although I did see a little pickup in the latest round of recruiting commitments that they got. So maybe it's just out of season and people aren't paying attention, but they're going to have to at least be competitive in those first few games that you mentioned, Chris, or they could lose their fan base, or at least a part of it. Now, there's a hardcore group of Virginia football fans that will always be there, rain or shine, win or lose. They're there to support, but you get the others that are hangers on or bandwagon jumpers and all that. You'll lose those in a hurry if you can't at least be competitive and make the games entertaining and somewhat interesting, I think.
And that's been a problem. I mean, even when Broncos teams were winning, Virginia hasn't sold a game out since the 2008 season opener with Southern Cal, and that wasn't because of UVA. That was because it was a really good Southern Cal team.
Right.
And, I think in 2019, the year that Virginia went to the Orange Bowl, there was nearly 60,000 for the Florida State game early that year. Depressingly much less than that it was around 55,000 for the Virginia Tech game, which was for the ACC regulars for the division championship to get into the ACC championship game that year that Virginia won. First time they'd beaten Tech in all those years and still couldn't fill the place up. And so the fan base, has been reluctant to come back even during that one really good year, which isn't that long ago. The last couple of years has been, last year particularly, I know the announced average attendance was around 40,000 in a 60,000 seat stadium. Jerry, you and I were there for each of those games. There weren't 40,000 people, I don't think, for a single game, much less an average of 40,000.
No, they've highly inflated those numbers, I believe.
Yeah, if it was 30,000, we're lucky in most games. And you're and this year with at least last year going in, there were somewhat decent expectations because Brennan was coming back, because the receivers were back. The previous year's team had started 6-2, faded down the stretch. There was a new coach who's from Clemson, so there was some hope going into last year.
Yeah.
Not only the 3-7 finish, the way the offense played, and then of course the tragedies of November 13th that will resonate, unfortunately, for years. There's not expectations going into this season. And then the season starts with Tennessee in Nashville, a really good Tennessee program coming off a great year. I know they got a new quarterback they'll have to integrate, but they pull from a better stock on, fair or not to say about our guys, Tennessee's pulling from a different class of quarterbacks to replace its quarterback than we are. That game could be a awful start to the season if things get off to the, if this team gets blown out in that first game and then has to come back home, lick its wounds against a JMU team that's sitting there just waiting to, pull the big win against the team from over the mountain. and show up Virginia in its own stadium in JMU's first visit as an FBS team. I mean, this season could go off the rails really quick, and if that's the case, yeah, we'll be there in October and November with lots and lots of empty seats, and that's it's not fun for anybody. It's not fun for the fans who are there. It's not fun for the writers. It's not fun for the players. You have recruits coming in for future classes, and they're going to be there with no energy in the crowd. It's a snowball effect, unfortunately.
Yeah, three points to some of the things you mentioned. That one, the last time Notre Dame was here 2 years ago, they didn't sell that out. And Notre Dame was in the top 10 in the country. They bring a lot of fans. They normally sell out everywhere they go. People, if nothing else, just want to see Notre Dame.
Well, and Virginia
They
going into
couldn't
that
sell
game
that
was,
out.
and we were still in the ACC race at that time.
Yes, absolutely. And I know Armstrong was hurt and didn't play, but still, I think had he played in that game, I think Virginia might have been able to pull the upset in that game. I would not have been shocked had Virginia won that game. Another point was about JMU. That'll be their Super Bowl. I mean, you're right. Licking the chops is an understatement.
Yeah.
They're gonna. I'm sure they've already got that. Had it circled on their calendar for a long time. And another point about the Tennessee quarterback. I know he's a freshman, but I'm already seeing him on some SEC posts and stuff that he's already being mentioned as possibly being one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the SEC this year as a rookie. So if they're counting on him coming in and blowing it for the balls, they better think about something else, because this kid, from what I've read, is really, really good and advanced for a college freshman. So that just makes it even more tough sledding in that category. But I mean, they just got to hope that they can go out there and not let that game get out of hand and lose any confidence that they may have. Because, like, as we keep saying, JMU is going to come in here with a world of confidence, thinking, hey, if we can knock off Virginia, we're going to stake a claim as the best team in the state.
Yeah.
And, who's going to argue with that? The Hokies will, but I'm sure JMU feels like that they can beat anybody in the state. And then, like you said, going to Maryland used to be kind of a picnic, but I don't think it is anymore. I think even though their program is not great, it's further advanced than it was when they joined the Big Ten. They've hired the guy was the Alabama offensive coordinator for a year, and he's done a good job with Tagovailoa up there, and getting a little bit better recruit. They won a couple of surprisingly Big Ten games last year that I didn't think they could win. And NC State speaks for itself. Boston College, I haven't looked at them very closely. I'm not sure what they have coming back from last year, but they've been, except for the last time they were here a few years ago, when they kept opening up one quarterback after another, and like the 4th or 5th string quarterback threw for a school record, breaking Doug Flutie's passing records against what was a terrible Virginia pass defense at that point in time. Normally they're a team that just likes to beat you up and play physical football. I don't know what they've got coming back. I haven't looked. So, but playing them on the road has never been easy.
JMU opens with Bucknell, so they'll come in with a warm-up game. Let's just say it that way, and Virginia will be coming off the Tennessee game. I brought up something too, Jerry. I wrote a column today on Augusta Free Press about the quarterback battle and how I guess I've already said it here. I expect it'll be Tony Muskett's job to lose just because he's got the work. He's been able to put consistent work in, whereas Jay's been playing baseball for the last 6 or 7 months. What a concern I've got is I was talking with someone around the program a few weeks ago and mentioning that I was impressed with Anthony Colandrea, the true freshman who actually graduated high school early, was able to participate in spring practice. I thought he looked pretty good in the spring game because Woolfolk was not able to play in the spring game. Colandrea quarterbacked one of the two teams in the scrimmage, and he threw. I think he was 26 of 37 passing. Got a lot of work back there in the backfield, and I thought he looked pretty comfortable back there. It was emphasized to me that no, he will not be in the battle for QB1 going into training camp. It's definitely down to Jay and to Tony Muskett. But what that tells me then is Colandrea is also not. If you can't be number one, you can't be number two. You're number three, and a concern I've got is then that this person who was telling me about all this was also saying, well, likely, I mean, Tony Elliott has said he's going to make his choice early in camp. He's not made a choice yet. He probably could have after the spring, based on sort of the tea leaves I'm reading here, thinking that everything I'm hearing tells me it's going to be Tony Muskett's job. If that's the case, what I was told is that they're preparing some things for Jay to get on the field because, as you mentioned, Tony saw how electric he can be. So they want to do some things, maybe some wildcat plays, maybe lining him up at slot receiver, lining him up in the backfield as a running back, kind of the way Robert and I used Keaton Thompson for 3 years. And maybe even getting one of the field as a punt returner. Tony talked about that last year in one of his pregame, early week press conferences. Just a way to get him on the field. Okay, so I say all that to say, if your backup quarterback is out there running wildcat plays and slot receiver and punt returning, he might get hurt. Can happen. And then it's down to Tony Muskett, a transfer from an FCS school and a true freshman quarterback that right now they don't think is ready to be the number one quarterback. That's when things can really go off the rails if something happens there.
Yeah, no question. Colandrea is an interesting, intriguing, I guess, recruit. He put up incredible numbers down in Florida in a pretty competitive league. But not many schools bit on him, and I know he's small, but he's got a strong arm and he's got a lot of football savvy. I don't know. We saw him in the spring game. It didn't see much more to be able to judge. And like you said, he had some decent numbers, but it was a spring game. The jury's still out on him, at least as far as fans and media go. The coaches obviously get a lot better looks at him than we do. But I mean, if Woolfolk could get hurt and Colandrea is not a guy that they feel confident in being number two at this point in time, being a true freshman, what do you do? What do you do if Muskett gets hurt?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's I like Muskett's confidence. He comes in, he's a very focused kid. I talked to him a couple times in the spring, and he says all the right things, and he exudes confidence and believes that he's been, he said, I've been around football for a long time now. He has a bunch of starts. He's got a lot of experience. Just a matter of how it translates from FCS to FBS football, and people are going to test him early to see what he's made of. And if he shows any weaknesses, people will try to exploit that from week to week, because we all know coaches are the biggest copycats of anybody in the country. So you're going into training camp and into September with a huge question mark. I mean, a huge question mark. And all eyes are going to be on that quarterback race. And I don't know what to predict in terms of that. We just won't know until we see it live against another team. instead of against an inter squad scrimmage.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of Tony Muskett, his last game, he got injured at the end of last season. His last game was against Rhode Island in front of 3,478 people. His next game is going to be in Nashville in an NFL stadium against Tennessee in front of 65,000 people wearing the wrong color orange from our perspective.
It'll be overflowing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky we're not playing them in Knoxville because it'd be 110,000 people wearing the wrong color orange. But yeah, it's gonna be different as far as that goes. And you brought up a point, Jerry. It kind of made me think what happens if one of those guys gets hurt, whether it's Muskett or Woolfolk gets hurt. I remember it most came out during Bryce Perkins' 2019 season, and it was actually I think it was Brennan as the backup got hurt, and as a result, they Bronco Mendenhall and Robert and I really vanillaed the offensive game plan for like 4 or 5 games because they realized they could not risk getting Bryce Perkins hurt because there was no one behind Bryce Perkins after Armstrong was down for a few weeks there, and so if that's the case, I mean, yeah, if something happens to either Jay or Tony, then everything we bring up to Jerry is not positive.
Yeah,
it just gets worse the more you think about it.
It's not like we're trying to be negative.
No.
Yeah, they had. I think they had maybe Woolfolk and Keaton Thompson and who was the other quarterback from Woodbury Forest whose name escapes me?
It was Lindell Stone. In 2019,
Yeah,
in 2019, we didn't even have Woolfolk yet. He was still in high school, and Keaton Thompson was still at Mississippi State. We had Lindell Stone as the third string guy. In 2019. That's why. I mean, no offense to Lindell Stone, but that's why. That's why it was a 4-game stretch too. I think that year Virginia started 4-0. Armstrong got hurt when he was running the offense for a series in like not the Louisville game. It was another game that year. And the next 4 games when the offense went very plain to keep Bryce healthy, that Virginia went 1-3 in those 4 games. So yeah, you gotta account for, because I know there will be people who say, but look at the quarterbacks on the roster. There's like 8 guys there. Well, there's 2 guys in the mix for quarterback 1, and there's a third guy, and then there's a bunch of other guys who are technically quarterbacks who will never play quarterback in college, at least not at the Division I level, the FBS level. No offense to them, but they're there. They might be quarterbacks by name, but they're not going to play in the ACC. And so, yeah, the numbers are thin there, and that's not entirely Tony Elliott and Des Kitching's fault. They inherited different quarterbacks recruited by a different offensive coordinator. Robert and I recruited guys who fit his system. And we're only in year 2 of Tony's system, and he's still trying to get guys who play football the way he does. It took Bronco and his group a couple years to get the guys they wanted in place. In fact, his first 2 starting quarterbacks were both transfers. Kurt Binkert and Bryce Perkins were both transfers. Brennan Armstrong was the first homegrown quarterback that Bronco had. So it takes a while to get your guys in place and get them ready to play quarterback. But in that case, yeah, there's a bunch of guys there holding clipboards right now in the huddles and in practices under Tony Elliott and Des Kitchings, who just don't fit their system and are not going to be able to really give them much, this year or next year, that kind of thing. That's what makes this even harder. There's just not a lot of numbers there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think Bronco and his staff did a very good job after getting Armstrong of finding quarterbacks, really. And they're going to pay for it. It's just, they were lucky that Bryce Perkins was who Bryce Perkins is. I mean, they found him at a junior college out of Arizona, who Jason Beck actually discovered him. He knew the head coach at Snow College, where he may have gone to school. I think Bronco went to school.
Went to school there, yeah.
and they knew the head coach there, and Bryce playing out in Arizona had come in and just tore up a playoff game against Snow College, and this guy just raved to Jason Beck about how good he was, and Jason saw some film and said, "Okay, what's this guy's number?" And they brought him on board as soon as they possibly could. And I remember the first time I met Bryce, it was in gosh, I can't remember. It was I know it was a really cold, nasty day, and I met him inside the McHugh Center for an interview. I think it was his first interview he'd had here since arriving in Charlottesville. And while I was waiting on him, I bumped into Marcus Higgins, my old friend, in the hallway. And I said, Marcus, what's your opinion of this Perkins kid? And he just started grinning and smiling and shaking his head. And he said, we've never had anybody like him before at quarterback. And I said, you mean as like versatility, athletically, all that? He said, yes, all of the above. He said, and I said, well, what about you? I mean, you were pretty darn versatile and athletic. He said, I can't hold a candle to this kid. So, I mean, they got so lucky bringing him in, and who knows where Broncos program would have gone if they hadn't been able to lasso a guy like him and get him into the fold and rewrite Virginia offensive records and career records in 2 years.
Well, both those two, the first two guys, Binkert and Perkins, both fell into their laps in a sense because they were injured. Binkert got injured, tore his ACL at East Carolina. Then there was a coaching change. Ruffin McNeil got fired and he left. And actually Ruffin joined the staff at UVA for a time. And then so Binkert transferred. And then Perkins he suffered a broken bone in his neck.
Yeah.
At Arizona, I think it was Arizona or Arizona State, one of those two. Arizona State, yeah. And then he ends up at the junior college. He was a 4-star recruit out of high school. I mean, stud out of high school. And so they both fell into their laps. They did well by them, but for 4 years you had quarterbacks that they hadn't recruited and developed. They just got the finished products in both cases. And both those guys are in the NFL, been bouncing around the periphery of the NFL, Binkert on either as a backup quarterback or practice squad guy, and then Perkins as a backup quarterback, got a few starts last year. And again, Brennan's the first guy that group developed. They recruited athletes though. The Vianney and Mendenhall group, they recruited some, because they also recruited Keaton Thompson, who ended up putting it wide receiver, and he was the leading receiver the last 2 years. I'm thinking of that Jacob Rodriguez kid who came in and was supposedly a quarterback, ended up playing receiver and running back and everything else. They have those two guys who are deep on the depth chart now, who were both like, champion sprinters in high school.
Yeah,
get them on the field somehow.
Yeah.
But they recruited athletes at that position because the air raid offense that Anai prefers, you need a very mobile quarterback who can threaten defenses with feet as much as with their arms. And the pro style offense that Tony Elliott prefers, he would like a guy who can stand back in the pocket, stand up tall in the pocket, and pick apart a defense that way. And that Tony Muskett's the only guy who really fits that bill, because even Jay Woolfolk, he's a baseball pitcher who throws 97 miles per hour on the mound, but as a football player, he's a little more raw, and certainly his speed is his key element there. And how that fits into the pro style, his talent level being what it is, I don't know that it fits well in the pro style.
Yeah, and again, I don't think we could get a good gauge on that in the spring game, even though that's what they were trying to do. But I think they kept things fairly vanilla, and I didn't walk away from there with a good feel for what they're trying to do. And we probably won't until we see it unveiled out in Nashville and under less than ideal circumstances.
Less than ideal, indeed. I guess what Tony's probably selling his team on. I remember Jerry going, in past years, going to the ACC kickoff, which we're going to be going in a couple weeks here again this year. Whenever there'd be a team with a really big first game on the schedule, I would make sure to ask the coach and a couple players from that team, because most teams start kind of like JMU starting with Bucknell. Most teams like to start with an easy game just to kind of get the kinks out and that kind of thing. But,
Yeah.
When you start start a season with a game like Virginia starting Tennessee in Nashville, boy, that should have an imprint on every sprint you run, every weight you lift, every drill you run, all season long, because you got to get ready for Tennessee. There's no warm-up game. You got to go out there and be ready to play at your best in your first game. And so, to some degree, that can be a good thing if you take it that way. And I'll say this. I mean, we've been kind of, okay, this could go wrong, that could go wrong. If Virginia goes out in this Tennessee game and hangs with Tennessee, has a chance in the second half to make it interesting, that can put a different spin on the way this season could go for Virginia.
Yeah, no question about it. But you got to remember, this is also a Tennessee team that blew Clemson out in the bowl game too.
Yeah.
So don't want to rain on the parade, but I don't know. If I'm trying to rebuild Virginia, and I know that the cupboard is bare in some spots and stuff with Broncos' sudden exit, I'm not taking any games like Tennessee or Maryland. Maybe there's, I don't know. The Tennessee game certainly wasn't scheduled in advance. Maryland may have been. I'm going to do like Duke did when they couldn't beat anybody. I'm going to schedule some of the weakest non-conference teams I can find in America and try to build some confidence, some wins. And if I can sweep my non-conference schedule and win 2 conference games, I'll qualify for a bowl game. And I think if you follow that method for 2 or 3 years and build your program, build some confidence, get some recruiting going, get in some bowl games, even if they're meaningless bowl games, they're still bowl games, and recruits want to go to bowl games, no matter how bad they are. But I mean, I think that's the smart way of rebuilding a football program. Once you've got it built, hell yeah, you can take on the world. But even Broncos' best teams would have probably struggled a little bit against this Tennessee team. Maybe not the one that went to the Orange Bowl, because they gave Florida a pretty decent game. But I don't think this is the smartest approach in trying to rebuild a football program, is scheduling teams that you're not favored to win, not favored to beat. And what does that do to your program? What does that do to your fan base? What does that do to your recruiting? I don't know. I think there's a better way.
You said when Duke scheduled a certain way when they weren't able to win games. I think they won 9 or 10 games last year. I know they won 9 in the regular season. I'm not sure if they won their bowl.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what
the new coach.
The new coach, right. A coach that was up for our job, and our coach was up for their job. All right. So here's Duke's schedule this year. Now they open with Clemson. The ACC said so you're open with Clemson, and then also week 5, they play Notre Dame. It's they're one of the teams gets to play Notre Dame this year. There are other 3 games in the month of September, non-conference games that they decided to schedule: Lafayette, Northwestern, and UConn.
There you go.
They're still scheduling that way, even though they won 9 games last year.
They probably wonder if they can continue to win 9 games.
And they won, and 5 of their first 6 games are in Durham. Yeah, they're scheduling the way that you should schedule if you're a Duke or Virginia. And Virginia is trying to schedule, I don't know what we're trying to be. But it's not.
Wake Forest used to do that too before they turned their program around, and I still don't think they play the most aggressive schedule in the world. But I don't know. if you're down on your luck and you're trying to rebuild, getting your brains beaten out every weekend is not the way to do it. We saw that happen here once before, and it didn't work.
No, yeah. I'm trying to look up Wake's schedule real fast to see if let's see. Elon, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, Georgia Tech. That's your first 4 games. We're playing Tennessee to open the season. That's it almost feels like we're playing a guarantee game, Jerry, and we're the guarantee team.
I guess you get a good payday out of it, but
I'd much rather be the team paying the team to come in than being the team paid to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, okay, that's a lot of good football talk there. Jerry, we have, we every week, the last few weeks, we've been saying, what do we have to talk about? Here we are at the hour mark. And yeah, we've done some talking here. What else is on your mind as we begin to wrap up the show?
Not a whole lot. Virginia did hire a new women's lacrosse coach, Sonia LaMonica from Towson State. She's been their head coach for 14 years and finished first or second every year. And I think, or at least 10 of the 14 years she was there in the CAA. And her husband, who was a standout player at Maryland, is on her staff. So a lot of lacrosse knowledge being infused, replacing Julie Myers, who was a legendary coach for a quarter of a century or more here in Virginia. So we wish her the best in her retirement, and wish Sonia and her husband the best in trying to advance Virginia's women's lacrosse program, which is one of the better ones in the country, I would guess. And so, not a whole lot else. Our good friend, Ryan O'Connor, texted him last night to congratulate him, has been elected to the American Baseball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. One of 2 guys that'll be inducted in January, and most deserving. I told him it was great, and he was, as you might expect, was very humble, and he said we'll have to have a Hall of Fame drink when I get back to town. And so we'll do that. But he's on the recruiting road, beating the bushes for the next 6 weeks, Chris, trying to find some of America's finest high school and junior college, and I guess other baseball talent wherever he can find it. I think they picked up a couple of transfers in the last few days, if I recall.
I wrote a brief piece about, they picked up 2 relief pitchers, an Ivy League pitcher of the year from Penn, and then another young man from Elon, both who have really big strikeout numbers coming out of the bullpen. So adding some depth to the pitching staff as was needed with losing some guys this year.
And they had a pitcher from Elon this past year,
Yeah.
pretty well. So, but other than that, things are kind of quiet on the Western Front, as they say. And I'm going to write a piece in a few minutes when we get off. A big Virginia fan. He didn't go to Virginia, but he's a big Virginia fan. Tremaine Blair is an actor, and he just landed his first role, and he's having a red carpet premiere tonight up in the DC Beltway area for his movie. I think he plays a guy named Hosea or something like that. I'll have to look at my notes, but he's very excited about that. I told him I was going to write a little piece about it. He's a big Wahoo fan. He's comes to every Virginia game he can. And he was kidding me. He said, if I could wear an orange and blue tuxedo for my premiere tonight, I would. So Wahoo fans, go out and support his project. And we wish him the best with his premiere up in Beltway. And other than that, I just want to thank our sponsors, Good Feet Store, Jonathan Cotton, saw him on Twitter the other day. He was posing I think it was in Williamsburg or somewhere with Colonel George Washington. And he keeps good company, that Jonathan Cotton does. But we love his store. I'm a customer. If you're having any discomfort, or even if you're not, walking or running, not only in your feet, but your knees, hips, back, whatever, go by and check them out. See their special arches. They especially design them for your feet, your specific feet, to help you walk and get around more comfortably. And he's a big UVA supporter, and we hope that our community will support his store. They're on fire. They're opening up stores all over the Mid-Atlantic with incredible success. And the Aberdeen Barn, one of my favorite places in the world, Virginia's finest steakhouse, Angela and Terry over there. I mean, it's Wahoo Central. If you want to go eat, have a great steak, ribs, prime rib, whatever. Get it there, and a great atmosphere, great service, great food. And Roback, activewear company based right here in Charlottesville, one of the fastest growing companies in their industry in the United States, and they're having great success as well. Sportswear for men and women. They got it all, and great colors, comfortable fabric. I can't say enough about it. It's great stuff. So look for them on our website as well, and you can order and get 20% off of your first order. So I know many of you have done so, and we encourage you to continue to support this group of Wahoos. Also, all the people that support us on my website, and thank them anytime you're in to see their product or visit their business. So thank you very much, and thank you to those sponsors. And also, you can, if you're listening to this on my site or Chris's site, you can find it on any podcast platform, if I'm not mistaken, Chris. And Chris has done a great job in getting us some visibility on YouTube. We're getting a lot of hits on that too. So if you can stand to look at me for an hour, Chris is a prettier boy than I am. So, but anyway, check us out on YouTube. I think you'll enjoy it. And we have I'm working on lining up some pretty interesting guests for some extra podcasts until football season gets underway. So I think you'll enjoy those too.
Basically, if there's a place I can find to get this podcast, I want to put it there. If they'll have us, we will be there. So I'll say that if there's any place out there, listeners, viewers, that you think we should be that we're not, send me an email at AugustaFreePress2@gmail.com. Let me know, and I'll put us there. So for the Hall of Famer Jerry Ratcliffe, I am Chris Graham signing off. Go to JerryRatcliffe.com, AugustaFreePress.com for the latest on UVA sports news. Everyone have a great week.